And let's see. So there's Justin just entered. We're really glad, Margaret, that you're finding. I hope some hope as you get through this. I know it's a difficult time for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But,
thank you.
But I also know you're going to get through this. I know everybody can get through this, and I just think that information is power, and the more we know about what we have to do and how our adversaries are looking at us, the better off we are. So the stronger we become. And so I don't know. So it's 8:31. I'm going to wait till 8:32. But I always, just so if anybody's here on the first time, I always stay on later, and I'm available for any questions that anybody has, and everybody's welcome to stay as long as they want. If anybody's a first timer, is this your first time, Anthony, on the webinar? Okay, so typically what I do on the chat on the bottom, there is a section there that it shows the link to the agenda, and I work through that agenda point by point. And after every point, I always ask, does anybody have any questions on why we're talking about it? And today we're going to be talking about the importance of a release plan and the importance of how does that relate to your advocacy strategy. So I'm going to now go ahead and start sharing my screen so everybody can see how I work through this. Let me see that one. I hope it's the right share. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share this screen, and this is the document that I'm using. And again, that link is in the chat. So if you want to see it more clearly, just go to the chat and click the link, and you should be able to open it. If you can't open it because it asks for access, just ask for access. I'll be watching for that. And if you have questions, if anybody has questions, please ask the questions inside of the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. I try to keep the other people muted while we're going through the project because I'm recording it. And so this lives on the website. But you'll find I'm very responsive to any questions. And so, as I said, today's webinar is about the importance of these personal release plans. When you're thinking about a release plan, it's really important. Oh, link does not show for me, Anthony, perhaps because I joined after you posted. No, you should be able to click it, that link, Anthony. Let me drop it in there again. Oh, let me just hit it myself. Yeah, it shows up when I hit it. But let me try and open it in an incognito window. Yeah. Sam, are you still on the call? Sam, are you on the call? Could you email, make sure that because if I can click it here on an incognito window,
send me the link and I'll text it to Anthony right now.
Yeah, it's in the chat. Grab it from the chat and text it to him. Okay. Can anybody else not access on chat? Okay.
So you grab it from the chat.
Sorry. I meant to say it's not available on the chat, or I don't see it. So perhaps because I joined after you posted it.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can add it right here.
Okay. It's not just me.
Okay. There it is. Now I just posted it.
Got it. It's there.
Okay, great. So
thank you.
All that does is it allows you to see it a little more clearly than you probably can if I'm sharing my screen. So as I said, I'm going to go through these point by point, talk about why it's important, and try to clarify some confusion, because we get a lot of questions from people in prison. I mean, I don't know how many we get every day, but quite a few. And and it's understandable that there's confusion between the CARES Act, the First Step Act, and the Second Chance Act. And all of these are very important to somebody going into the system. So the difference is, if I started in reverse order, the Second Chance Act, that was the first piece of legislation that opened opportunities for people to go to home confinement or to halfway houses earlier. It authorized the Bureau of Prisons to send people to out of prison and into the community for the last 12 months of their sentence. It didn't mean everybody got it. There's frequently a lot of litigation that takes place that gets the will of Congress when Congress passes a law and getting the BOP to act. But this law has been in effect for more than 10 years, since 2008. So it's pretty well established. And it was reauthorized in 2018 when the president signed the First Step Act. Again, there are things in the First Step Act that are a little bit confusing with the CARES Act. The CARES Act is not a law. It was a presidential, what do you call that? An executive order from the president in response to the pandemic. And so it authorized the director of the Bureau of Prisons. In fact, it encouraged the director of the Bureau of Prisons to send more people to serve their sentences in the community rather than in a prison. But it's important to understand these differences, and it's important to understand that the release plan is important to each. To every plan, the release plan is essential. So I want people thinking about, what does excellence look like in creating a release plan? And in order to think about that, what does excellence look like, you've got to not think about it from your perspective. And that's a hard thing to do, because I have no doubt that everybody on this webinar in their head is saying, I don't need a release plan. I don't even need to go to prison. I'm just in this situation and I've got to deal with it. But that's not the way the system operates. That's not the way this big bureaucracy operates. And those are not my words. You can listen to these experts who've told us that, to a judge. What he wants to see is this gradual, iterative approach where you're learning and you're thinking about the community. That's the theoretical purpose of corrections. So we always have to be thinking about the stakeholders of this system and how are we working to accommodate those people. So I want you to be thinking about that. Who's looking at this release plan? Think about a judge, because if anybody's going to try for compassionate release, that's a federal judge. If anybody's going to try later in the journey to get early termination of supervised release or a higher level of liberty on supervised release, you're going to have to go before the same sentencing judge. So the sooner somebody understands, well, what do they look at with regard to a personal release plan, the better off that person's going to be. I also have the probation officer here as a list. And the reason I have those there is because, for anybody who doesn't know, on our website up here under resources, you will see, I'm going to admit, Karen, under resources, you will see subject matter expert page. If you click on it, everybody can simply work through and watch these videos and see, how did these people speak about the release plan? Why did they say it was important? Okay, and these are all the people that created the policies that I'm talking about right now. So the more I understand how they think, the more I can say, okay, I'm going to create, because it's effectively a marketing package. You've got to market yourself to your audience, and you got to make the sale. The sale is to get you the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. And there are many different stakeholders there looking at this possibility of liberty. So the more you understand what are they looking at, the better off, the more effective of a personal release plan you can create. And we will send you what we think is an excellent release plan. We will include that on the website and show you a link so that you have kind of like a template to follow. That's the first section of this website. And through the rest of this webinar, that's what I'm going to be talking about. The importance of this release plan and the way it relates to your personal advocacy. Your personal advocacy is way more important than anything your lawyer is going to do. At least that's my experience. All of these people here, they don't care what your lawyer says. They know your lawyer is a paid advocate. They're concerned with what are you doing to make their job look, their performance on the job look better. And we'll get to a little bit more of that in this section right here. So you've got to be thinking, if there's any questions, remember, anybody can just plug them in the chat. But I'm going to keep going unless I see these questions. With everybody has an understanding, you can break any time. But every time I go through one section to the other, I'm going to be looking at this chat. So when you're thinking about your release plan, think about the staff's needs before your needs. And those, again, are not my words. Let's look at the memorandum that governs the CARES Act, and let's see what it says. Okay? I'm going to open it here on my website. This is the April 13th, 2021 memorandum from the Department of Justice. It's the most recent memorandum governing the CARES Act. And look at the first sentence. In our ongoing effort, and I can plug that in the chat as well, in case you guys don't have it, but it's available on the website. I'll just read it to you right now. In our ongoing effort to protect the health and safety of staff, that always comes before a word I hate, inmates, during the pandemic. So when you're creating your release plan, I want you to be thinking about that language, because your language has to be saying, hey, it's in the interest of the community to, I'm doing this for the interest of the community. Always think about these stakeholders and say, does that language apply? And you will see that in the example that I give a little bit below. Okay? So when you're thinking about staff emphasis under CARES Act, if you're going to ask for relief under CARES Act, okay, it's you want to protect the institution. You shouldn't be in prison, because if you're in prison, you're exposing the potential spread of the virus. That's what they're talking about. And you're safer to be in your home, in your community, to protect staff, to protect the community. Just remember that in your language. And we'll give you an example of that as well in this webinar before we get to the end of the webinar. If you're talking about the First Step Act, okay, the law, a different law, I want you to be thinking about congressional mandate. The Congress, when it passed this law, it mandated that the people that work for the Bureau of Prisons think about your success upon release. Think about you becoming back as a contributing citizen. So in your eyes, you're not a criminal, but that's not relevant. In their eyes, you're brought into the system, and so you're a criminal, and you've got to come back as a law-abiding citizen. And you want to make it look in your release plan that the staff encouraged you to do this. You want to effectively give them credit. So when they're going through their quarterly job descriptions, it would be awesome if they use you as an example. The only way that's going to happen is if you understand, how does the Bureau of Prisons govern their job performance in accordance with that congressional mandate. So we want to provide you with a model of excellence. What does excellence look like with regard to this release plan? And how can your staff member get credit for it? We'll show you how to develop that. And you can't develop it all at once. Because why? Because remember what I said earlier, it has to be iterative. It has to be, here's where I am now. This is where I'm going to be later. I did it because of these risk assessments and these tools. So you have to understand the way they are going to look at things. And most people in prison don't even think about that. Most people in prison, the only thing they're thinking about is, I want to get out of jail. So you've got to be different. That's the way that you can advocate for yourself best, is if you are different, if you understand, okay, how do I make myself stand out differently from anybody else? That's what's crucial to be successful in these plans. And our only goal is to help you get back to your community at the soonest possible time. But nobody can do it for you. I can show you, I can walk you through why it's important, but you're in there all the time. So you got to be thinking about this all the time. every day that you're in there, you got to wake up and say, okay, what am I doing today that's going to differentiate me from the other 500 people in this institution? Because the one thing you have in common with all those 500 people, they all want to get out of prison. So your release plan is an integral part of it, not because you need it, but because the staff requires it. The staff they have to check the box. And I'm going to show you those boxes as we continue to work through this webinar. But in the beginning, you kind of need to understand that, because it's very hard for successful people or non-criminogenic people to comprehend, why are they looking at me like I'm a criminal? Don't they know who I am? They don't care who you are. Okay, you're in a bureaucracy. You're a cog in a machine. Once they give you that number, my number was 163770004. It becomes you're the cog, and you got to help that machine turn so that you can get out of there as soon as possible. So when you are creating this release plan, we think you should start with this background, this procedural history, describing that you know how you got here. That doesn't mean that you're going to litigate your case again. Okay, that ship has sailed. If you've been sentenced and you're going into this system, the only goal right now is to get out with your dignity intact and ready to move on with your life. So start with that procedural history. And in this sample, I can show you how I used to do it and how I still do it, but it's not about me. It's about you. And it's about you thinking about these stakeholders who are judging you, who have the discretion to grant you relief or to just ignore you and put you through the system and keep you there as longer. What is their interest? Their interest is not to let you out of prison. Their interest is to keep this bureaucracy growing. And again, those are not my words. If you look at what the director said, he specifically said, I know that Congress wants this, and I got to train our staff, but there's 36,000 staff members. And many of those people it's difficult to train them because they don't want to get you out of prison. They want you to serve the whole sentence. They want to get overtime. They're happy when they're seeing disruption in the prison system. That's how the prison system, that's how bureaucracy operates. And it's not only the BOP, it's every bureaucracy. So if you understand that, you want to address that in this procedural history. You want to talk about, I made a bad decision. This is what happened. I understand my risk factors, right? These kinds of things you want to weave in that procedural history. What happened in your case? And I'm not talking about writing a manuscript, but it certainly would not be terrible to write 500 or 600 words in this section of your procedural history. It wouldn't be terrible to write 1,000 words. The more work you do, the more that you are going to stand out as somebody that's different from everybody else. And you have to be willing to iterate this release plan. So you start, this is going to be static, right? There's no history of violence in your case. But if there is a history of violence in your background, you need to address it. Your pattern score. That's something that you can check. Well, what is it? You simply have to click this link right here. If I open that link, I can go through it myself. If I'm a male, I go through this thing and I said, oh, what are these scores? How are they going to score me? And you score this, and then once you have your score, you know if you're low or minimum, which is what you have to be in order to get earn time credits. If you don't have a low or a minimum pattern score, then you have to be working to get that. All of that is important. History of violence against others only or against ourselves. That is a great question, Anthony, but I do think it's against others only. It's a violent offender is against others. So you just want to address it. If there's a history of suicide or a suicide attempt, I should say, then you want to address that, because that's what the Bureau of Prisons is going to expect. And that gets down here later in the webinar. I get into that and I'll show you what I am talking about, but you definitely want to address it. Don't leave things as if you're not thinking about them, because to a bureaucrat, that means you need more correcting, okay? You need to be in the program more. You want to show that you've gotten all the benefits of the program, of the correctional program. The more work you've done on yourself in the eyes of the system, the better they have done, the system has done. And that's how they check their little boxes of success. So you got to understand how you define success and how they define success, and try and find some synergies there. I may be in denial, but I steadfastly believe that I did nothing wrong, much less criminal. So how do I explain how I got there? I understand I'm supposed to be responsible and accountable for my actions. That's a great question, Chuck. That's a great statement to everyone, because that's typical of many people in prison. But I don't want to think of, you don't have to convince me. You have to convince the system. If you need help in writing that, then, let us know, because we've got members on our team that can probably help you do it in a manner that is palatable to you. Chuck, are you willing to engage in a conversation openly? Because if you are, I can kind of coach you through that right now, because I do think it's important for everybody on the webinar. Would you like to participate, or would you rather do this offline and drop it in the chat?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Michael?
I hear you. That's great.
I'm open. So
okay, if you're open, let's discuss that. And I frankly, I think this is better because it's interactive, and interactive is always great. So I am going to stop sharing my screen right now for a second. And how do I do that? I'll go over here. And now let's just have this conversation. If I'm to ask you what happened, what would you say?
I was asked to participate in a program in 2012 by Federal Home Loan Bank representative Shadante Dozier. She approached my affordable housing development company. I met with her, said I would try to help and participate in the program, that my development company had its own general contracting company with unlimited license, because I built neighborhoods and condominium projects. And she said that was not an issue, and that my development company could act as on the administrative side. My contracting company could be the contractor. Well, we did some work, and we just didn't have the manpower to really do it. So the Federal Home Loan Bank works with member banks, and the bank that we had been working with was a smaller bank, Ameris Bank. I'll drop names. I've got nothing to hide. And so I ran into my former banker. He was the retired president of Ameris Bank for the South Carolina market. And he asked me about the program, and I said, Carl, we're really not doing anything with it. He said, and he was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Guard as well. He said, well, I think that's something we need to pursue. And I said, great. I said, my development company has been handling the administrative side. My suggestion would be you handle the administrative side, and my contracting company will handle the contracting side. These were small, non-competitive bids. They're 12,500 geared to veteran rehabilitation. We didn't establish the pricing. The Federal Home Loan Bank established the pricing. My partner submitted all the paperwork. I got a 3-page worksheet of the scope of the work that was being done to the homeowner's house. That's what I did. And
What did they charge you with?
I was charged with Title 18, 371, conspiracy to defraud the federal government.
Okay. So your response, when you say you have to, you wrote in your chat, I may be in denial, but I steadfastly believe that I did nothing wrong, much less criminal. Okay. Nobody cares what you think, Chuck.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah, that's the first thing. That's the first thing to understand. That's your goal is to get out of prison. Your goal is
Just to
to help
convince
a
these
case
people.
manager check a box that you're responsible. You understand. Did you plead guilty to something?
Yes.
Okay.
And,
That's
and
a,
yeah,
and I know why you did it.
I was fighting it, and after several $100,000, but my partner caved, and then they gave me a week to
yeah,
either
and you're going to face 10 years or take a deal. I get it.
Well, you know the drill better than I do.
I know that drill really well.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, when you're going forward and preparing your release plan, you've got to think about the many people that are going to judge this release plan later in your future. Your case manager to start, the warden who's going to authorize you to get out, the probation officer that's going to oversee your supervised release, and a judge when you ask for early termination of supervised release, and you pleaded guilty. So what you want to say here is you want to say something along these lines. I've been a developer for 30 years or 50 years or however long it's been, okay? And my expertise is in looking at land and estimating budgets and providing jobs. But I was not an expert in understanding government contracts and government regulations. And my biggest flaw was engaging in a business without hiring real subject matter experts or professionals that could guide me on how to do it effectively. And in this case, I failed. I'm going to do it better. That you could couldn't you say that okay?
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that.
That's not, that's not doing anything really terrible. It's just saying, I am an expert in providing jobs. I'm not an expert in legalese. And it was a trigger for me that I acted too fast. And next time I've got to be more methodical. I've thought a lot about that ever since I've gone through this process, and I'm going to do better so that this never happens again. I mean, that's all, that checks their box.
Okay.
That's all you care about. But you definitely don't ever want to tell anybody in that system, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not criminal. The system is screwed and I pleaded guilty for that reason to avoid it. Because that's not going to help you. In their eyes, they're going to say he needs more supervision. And I could give 100 examples of where that's happened. Okay. He still doesn't get it, Your Honor. He needs more correct. I mean, it's,
I fully understand that. So
let's try and get our mind around saying, I didn't do enough due diligence and I didn't get the right experts to help me. And that will never happen again. That makes you, in their eyes, great. It doesn't matter where you are here for anybody. All that matters is we're always looking at this from the perspective of the people that we're trying to influence. Okay? That's all that matters. So I want to go back to sharing my screen. I hope it's the right screen. I've got so many Google Chrome. I think it's this one. I can't find which Google I'm supposed to open. I think it's this one. Let's see. Do you guys see that doc that I was on? Yeah? Okay, good. Okay. So when you're creating this, that procedural history, make sure that you've addressed every issue that they are going to be thinking about. If there's violence, address that. If there's something that influenced where you are, address that. All of that's going to be calculated in your pattern score. And it's also going to be calculated in when they're recommending you for different stages you're not even thinking about right now. Because right now you haven't gone to prison yet. See, you're probably not thinking about the halfway house. You're probably not thinking about the supervised release. But all this is part of your permanent record. And now everything's governed by like your pre-sentence investigation report and now your pre-release plan. So I want you guys to be thinking about this so that you're way ahead of the game and you can advocate for yourself better. This factor here is the detainer. This is an important subject. If you have any kind of outstanding charge anywhere, I don't care if it's an unpaid parking ticket, make sure that you address that as soon as you can because it will, if you don't, it will complicate your advocacy campaign. It will complicate your ability to go home. It could potentially complicate if you go home. But there's this provision in the Bureau of Prisons and in the Department of Justice. I put a link here to it called the Interstate Agreement on Detainers. That link takes you right here. And this is important for people that have some type of an outstanding issue, whether it's an old DWI that was never satisfied, a parking ticket that wasn't paid, a speeding ticket. Any jurisdiction can place a detainer on you. This link shows you the provisions of that and what it means to you. What it means is if somebody has a detainer, the Bureau of Prisons is going to look at this as an outstanding charge, and it will preclude you from being able to go home at the soonest possible time. There's a mechanism to work it. If you know of a charge that exists, or if you get to the prison and they say, oh, there's a detainer against you, don't just go to sleep on it. You can file this simple form with whoever lodged a detainer against you, and they have to respond by allowing you an opportunity to clear the detainer, or if they don't respond at all, after 180 days, it comes off. That's the law, and that was the link that I provided you with. So if you find there's a detainer, hopefully you don't have a detainer, but if you do, and all of this is computer generated, some people say, I didn't even know I had a detainer, okay? But once you have one, you've got to take action and file this interstate agreement on detainer form. And then the clock starts ticking and they only have 180 days to resolve it. If they don't resolve it, it comes off and you get out of prison earlier, or you qualify to get out of prison earlier. So make sure that you address this, you look at this, you just think back over the past 15 years. Have you ever had any kind of altercation that some law enforcement agency may have a hold on you that you don't know about? You want to address it. I don't think I have to go too much further on it because I doubt anybody here has that, but it's a popular thing in prison that once you get to prison, you learn, holy shit, I didn't know I have a detainer, but you do. It's also very important here, of course, going forward, that you keep a clean disciplinary record and you apprise staff that you're conscious of this, that you're conscious of your disciplinary record. That should all become a part of your release plan, disciplinary record. Okay? This should all be part of your iterative plan. You're always thinking about going forward. You're documenting it. You're showing that this is top of mind to you because you know it's top of mind to them. And of course, as we discussed in last week's, the last several webinars, make sure you're participating or you're compliant with the financial responsibility plan. These are areas that they are going to consider when you're advocating for yourself for early release, whether it's the CARES Act, the Second Chance Act, or the First Step Act. all of those have a provision in there for your release plan. And remember, whatever you have now, you want it to look different in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, and in a year. You want to show, oh, I've learned from the Bureau of Prisons. I mean, for you, Chuck, what you said, it would be great to have that iterative story that said, when I first pleaded guilty, I pleaded guilty because I thought I didn't do anything wrong and I just wanted to avoid it. But the more I spent in corrections, the more I learned that I was negligent. I should have hired somebody. That looks good to the system. That's what they want to see. You growing within the system, right? They've invested billions and billions of dollars in building our nation's criminal justice system. You just want to be a good cog in the bureaucracy and get through it and give them credit for it. But if you are trying to get out on CARES Act, you also have to be considering what are they considering, and they're considering these CDC guidelines. These change a lot. So when they're changing a lot, we will be sending this to you in prison. The most recent one that we're using is this version here, which was May 3rd, 2022. My wife is a public health nurse, so she's always looking at this, and that's why we send these updates to people in prison that you can use in your CARES package. You want to know what they're saying, how is it changing, what's going on in the country, and how can this benefit you when you put forward a package. Well, if you're in prison, you don't have access to that, but we do. So that's why we're always updating it at least once a month. We're updating with whatever they're doing. The most recent update was 2 months ago in May. But we always know that politics influences this, and we want to be providing you with this information that you can use to advocate for yourself. It should be a part of your release plan if you're trying to get relief through CARES. Okay? If you're just going through the First Step Act, that's a different story. You don't need that. If politically it says that the pandemic is over and there's no more CARES, well, then it becomes irrelevant. But it's relevant right now, and it's probably going to be relevant for at least another year or a couple of years. And that since that can have a huge implication on your release date, you want to know it. So let's take a look now at the time factors for release. Okay? We're going to build this calculator. I've already tasked our tech team with building a calculator, but it's not that difficult to get a projected release date for you, regardless if it's CARES or First Step Act. This all starts with your sentence length. Whatever your sentence length is, you could just open a spreadsheet and plug that in. And we could do some examples if you don't know how to do it. But just open a spreadsheet and say, okay, what's the number of months that I am serving? And then if you have more than 1 year, that's a yes or a no question. If I have more than a year, the answer is yes. If I don't, it's no. If it's yes, you get statutory good time. Okay? Now you have to serve a year before you get the good time, but you can project what it's going to be. So 15% of your sentence length is pretty simple. That your net projected date is going to be your sentence length less the good time. So if you've got 10 years, you're going to get roughly a year and a half of good time. Okay? That's the law. If you have 10 months, you're not going to get any good time because it's the law doesn't provide for it. So you don't even have to worry about it. But if you have 2 years, yeah, that's 24 months. After 1 year, you're going to get 15%. Then you're going to get the rest of it prorated as you serve the time. But it's roughly 15%. Not roughly, it is 15%. The next thing on your release factor is if you have RDAP. You got to take that into consideration. But again, that's only if you qualified for RDAP. By now, if you've already been sentenced, this is a factor. So if you completed the product, great. If you're in the middle of it, you want your release plan every time you're giving it to your team, you want to give them an update on how you're doing with RDAP or whatever you're doing. Again, you're trying to make the people in the system look good. Okay? That's your goal. If you have more than 36 months, you can get a year off your sentence. If you have 30 to 36 months, you can get 9 months off your sentence. If you have more than 24 months, but less than 30 months, you get 6 months off your sentence. So these are factors that are going to go into your calculator. Then there's the earned time credits, but that's separate. I want to discuss those later because it's a little more comprehensive. It's newer and it's not as well established as these other factors. This is new legislation, only applicable because of the First Step Act. But we'll get to that at the bottom. So these are things I want you to be addressing in your release plan. And again, I will send you what I think is a model release plan. But if I were to write one for me, you've just got to look and say, how is mine similar to this? That's why that conversation with Chuck was so important earlier. How are you addressing the procedural history? Although you don't think you should belong in there, all that's important is what do they think? Try to minimize what you think and try to focus on their perspective. Okay, so always understand your audience and understand how they define success. Understand how you define success, and then find those synergies and make the best decision on how you're going to market yourself. Always think about this as a marketing plan, okay? That's what you're creating, a marketing plan with one goal in mind. That goal, get you back to your community as soon as you possibly can get there. So the more you understand about them, the more you can craft this plan that will help you get the goal that you want. Now I want to give you a couple of examples of how to consider these factors. And I'm going to give you these examples from my own experience of going through there. When I went into the system, there was this concept of new law versus the old law. All of you, everybody on this webinar is new law. The only people that would be under old law, you had to be convicted before November the 1st, 1987. So it's a long time ago. But at the time that I was convicted, there was the same kind of turmoil going on as exists right now with the First Step Act. Congress passed legislation. Other agencies had to interpret it and apply it. At the time that the new law passed, there were some people that said it was unconstitutional. My judge was one of those people. It took 10 years. No, it took about a year or so, a couple of years before the Supreme Court ruled on it. And when they ruled on it, clearly that case law affected me. But I had to make a decision. Do I want to try and challenge it? Just like each of you are going to have to make decisions on, do I go for CARES Act? Do I go for First Step Act? And how do I make that decision? In my case, the Supreme Court's rule would have clearly benefited me. But I also had to take into consideration my judge. And my judge sentenced me to 45 years. He didn't have to, but he did. He could have sentenced me to 10 years, but he sentenced me to 45 years. Under the new law, I knew that I could have gotten a lower sentence, but I also knew that I wouldn't get as much good time under the new law. So there was a factor that I had to weigh, just like there's a factor that each of you are going to have to weigh when you are thinking about, how am I going to try to get out? Am I going to try to get out through CARES? Am I going to try to get out through First Step Act? How am I going to try to get out? How is my release plan going to influence what happens? That happened to me many times through the 26 years I served in prison. The other time was kind of at the end of my sentence,
when I could have gotten out through the U.S. Parole Commission, or they told me you can go under Second Chance Act and get to the halfway house and gave me a date and say you'll be out 12 months early. There were pluses and minuses on each decision. I had to do a cost benefit analysis that was best for me. I know that every person I'm on this call with right now is also going to have to make those kinds of hard decisions. You don't have to make them right now, but you're going to make them when you're in prison. And when you're in prison, you're going to reach out to our team. And I want to remind you of this conversation that I'm having right now. What's the best decision for you? Where are you? Last week, I gave an example of the fella who had a 37-month sentence, and he got clarity that he could have gotten out in 13 months. That's a victory. You've got to celebrate a victory. You've got to be thinking to yourself, what's the best possible outcome? I can't change what the judge did. Nobody can. But the goal is that how do I get out at the soonest possible time? And that requires critical thinking. And that requires us as a team, and I'm part of your team, and the members on our team are all part of your team, is based on what you learn when you get there, what's going to be the best thing for you. There's going to be a lot of factors that come into this that we don't know the answers to right now, because we don't know who your case manager is. We don't know who your warden is and how the warden's changing decisions. We don't know what the new director of the Bureau of Prisons is going to do. So what's changing as you go through this journey? What are you doing to influence that change? Do you want to get to the halfway house early, or do you want to make sure that you've got a better chance of getting to home confinement? Those are different questions. And this is all going to evolve as time passes once you get to your institution. Our job is going to be to communicate with you. What are you finding out? What can we do to help you along the way? And then ultimately, you have to make the decision. It's not going to be your lawyer, because all of this is about self-advocacy. It's your case manager is going to be working one-on-one with you. We want to help you make the best decision. And the only thing I can promise you is honesty, that I will tell you, hey, this is what I would have done in that situation. I want to say, what do you want to do? And then we'll discuss it and say, okay, let's create a plan on how you've defined success. So I can tell you two examples right now, and they're both they're real-time examples. One guy had a 21-month sentence. Let's call him Jim. And Jim wanted to get a special exception of going through the CARES Act. So he didn't want to even do the 25% rule thing, right? He wanted to get out like the first month. It didn't work out for him, because in order to try for that, he had to try for the Correctional Programs Division. He had to bring his case to the attention of the people in Washington, D.C. He had to build a great package, and we built a great package, but now it removed the discretion out of the local institution, and it went to Washington, D.C. And had he not done that, he would have qualified it that as soon as he hit that 25% mark, which would have been in about 5 months. Well, because it went to Washington, D.C., it got flagged in his file, and now when he got to 25%, that Washington said, no, we've already looked at him. We don't want to let him out under the CARES Act. He did get out under the Second Chance Act. So he is in a halfway house now. But when he got to the halfway house, he said, I would have rather been in prison. This is worse, being in a halfway house. But that's temporary too. Now he's got a pass to be on home, to go to a job 6 days a week. He leaves at 8 in the morning. He doesn't have to come back until 8 o'clock at night. And on the one day that he's Not working, he's on a home pass. So he gets a 2-day home pass every week. So he's saying, I can deal with this through November. But had he not applied for that special consideration, he would have likely been on home confinement the entire time. That's the same thing that just happened with a fella that is currently in a halfway house trying to get that higher level of liberty. It's hard. It's a struggle. I don't understand why they're doing this to me. But I understand that process. I'm going to guide you. And I have to always remind them, remember, when you were in prison, all you wanted was to get out. Remember that before you went to prison, all you wanted was to get out. But there are always collateral consequences that follow the decisions that we make. I want you to understand those collateral consequences, and I want you to make decisions that are best for you. Sometimes it's better to stay in prison and not go to a halfway house. In my view, it's always better to get out of prison as soon as you can, because when you're in prison, there's a gazillion things that can happen that you don't control. So my default is say, let's get you out of there as soon as we possibly can. And then if it's iterative, get you to a halfway house, then get you to a higher level of liberty, or get you to home confinement if we can, then get you on supervised release and get you off of that. So every stage, getting a higher level of liberty for me is a victory. I've got a question here, and I'm going to respond to that. Okay. If your sentence is less than 1 year, which programs qualify for early release? All of them. Okay. You still can qualify for First Step Act credit. You still qualify for CARES Act. You still qualify for Second Chance Act. Okay. So you want to get there, and we want to assess which one do we want to pull the trigger on. Okay. Because right now, I don't know. I don't know where you're going yet. I don't know who the warden is there. You're going to know when you get there, and you're going to communicate with our team through the proper channel, which is either going to be, Carol, I'm asking my wife something. Is it admin? So for some people, it's going to be through I guess for everybody on this webinar, right? It would be admin, right? Okay. So we have a team. My wife is really involved in the team. So you'll send emails to admin@earningfreedomcorp.com. You'll get this information before you surrender. Forgive me for not knowing it all. I work in a different area, but my wife handles this. So it would be admin@earningfreedomcorp.com. You're going to tell us what you're hearing at that institution, and our team is going to help you prepare the package that's going to be best for you. We just don't know right now what that package is. The one thing I do know is your release plan is going to be an important part of any of them. So we want to be working on that release plan right away, and we want to be advancing or growing that release plan consistent with what I am telling you on this webinar. I'm 65 with coronary heart disease. I realize CARES Act would apply to my situation. Yes, it would. Since according to I'm at greater risk. Are there other early release programs I should focus on that you would recommend? Yes, because they all work in synergy. So in the Bureau of Prisons, remember what I just told you about my experience, that there was the good old law versus new law. And I said it was changing. It took many years to change. Well, the First Step Act, it's been changing since 2019, 2020, 2021, 22. They have these things called earned time credits. You qualify for those. So I want you, when you get there, find every program that qualifies for earned time credits and participate in them, even though you don't need them. Chuck, if you're developing neighborhoods and businesses and creating hundreds of jobs, you probably don't need what is fun with walking, right? Well, walking with ease. You probably don't need that program, but it's going to get you 15 days of credit. And so you want to take it. Any program, take it, because it will apply to your early release. it will apply to your computation sheet. They're going to give you these computation sheets. I don't know when the Bureau is going to have this system complete. My information yesterday is the goal is to have these earned time credits regularly calculated by October the 1st. So every month it's going to be advancing, and any credits you take on is going to advance your release date. So yes, CARES Act, Second Chance Act, First Step Act, all of them will benefit. You will benefit if you take those additional programs. Does that make sense, Chuck? Do you see that I'm asking you? Yeah, okay, good. So any class you see that qualifies for First Step Act, take it. If you have the ability to get into Unicor, that's automatically you get the 15 days, okay? So that's probably a good product. There's probably a waiting list to get into the Unicor factory, but if it's not Unicor, then get into a drug treatment program, get into parenting program, get into a budgeting program. It doesn't matter. If they have First Step Act qualification, you want to participate, and you've got to be responsible for getting there on time. We got a letter from a woman, I think it was yesterday, who didn't participate on one class, and they kicked her out. Okay, and now she can't get credit. The Bureau of Prisons is going to hold you accountable for every decision you make, and every decision you make in there, they're going to relate to your release plan. Oh, this person's clearly not prepared for release. They're missing appointments. I can't overemphasize how bureaucratic that system is. Don't look for personal consideration. Don't look for anybody to feel sorry for you. Don't look for it to be fair. Just look for, say, I've got to understand the machine. I'm a cog in the machine. I don't want to be a special case. Just let me through here so I can go home. The more you know that, the more you understand that, the more I can impress upon you that as far as this system is concerned, there's not even a common humanity between you and the staff. They may act like it, they may be friendly, they may do those things. In your head, you're a tool. Make yourself useful to them, because they just want to get a paycheck and they just want to get checked off that they're doing what Congress mandated them to do with the First Step Act. Document all of this on your release plan, and you are going to be better off. You just always have to anticipate. It may be called a system of corrections, but that's really not what it's about. And your job isn't to try to change that. Your job is not to tell them how they could do it better. Your job is not to tell them what a terrible system. This is just adult daycare. Let it go. If you want to make changes in policy, do that on the other side. Come and work with me in our nonprofit. Right now, I only want you to get out of jail and get out of prison. And that means understand the system, define excellence, understand what the case manager is going to look at. And now that's where I'm going to get to this case manager template. So I'm going to go in here into a section I downloaded. Documents right there. BOP program statements, release plan. Here is like a checklist. I hope you'll be able to see that. Can you guys see this thing on my sheet? Please, somebody add in the chat if you can see my whole screen, and you can see this release plan, transition plan. Somebody, if you can't see it, I'll copy it. Can anyone see a document? Can anyone see a document? No, you can't see the document. Okay. Let me do this then. I'm going to copy. It's because I'm in Google Drive. So I'm going to go back to my Google Doc, and I'm going to go to the bottom of this. I'm going to cut and paste it. So there it is. Now you can see it, right? Hold on a second. Oh. Copy. Copy. I'm not able to do it. Shoot. Or did I? Yeah, there I did. I copied it. So go to page 6. You'll see now page 6 of this document. How do I get there now? I can't seem to maneuver my screen. Okay, there we go. This is the document that the National Institute of Corrections created for case managers. Okay? They're looking at all these things called risk levels and criminogenic needs. Remember, bureaucracy. You're all criminals. Okay? I'm a criminal. What's a criminal? It's just that's a legal term. You've been convicted of a crime. You pleaded guilty to a crime. Understand that because of that, they've got to take credit for their risk and needs assessment. Did they assess what are the triggers here? What's wrong with this person's thinking? I'm not asking you to say how nuts this is, because that's not relevant. What's relevant is understand how have you done everything. So in your release plan, you're going to want to address all of these things, not in the same kinds of boxes, but it sure would be helpful to a case manager if you wrote in your release plan, I was really conscious before I came to prison. I wanted to learn what is an excellent release plan. I found this document that the National Institute of Corrections created on what does it look like. And I went through it. And so I made sure that I had my social security card. I made sure that I have my birth certificate. Make sure I had picture identification, all this stuff. Relate all of this so that you build a really phenomenal release plan, because this is what they said, were these interventions done? Did I have documentation of all this stuff? So try to just go through this document. Now it's a part of this document. It'll also be part of the what do I call it? The webinar replay on here, and just spend some time on it and think about, how am I going to answer all these kinds of ridiculous questions? Well, the more thought you give to it, the better off you're going to make your case manager and your unit team look. And if you could tell them, I did all of this because my case manager advised me on creating a release plan, it makes it look like the case manager advised you on it, and the case manager looks better. The more you work on this kind of stuff, the better you're going to be able to advocate for yourself. So I don't want to go through all this. It'll take us hours to do all of that. I just want you to be aware of it, and that's why I plugged it in there. So now I can write see below, see below. So now it's there. You can decide whether you want to spend time on it. I can tell you what I would have done if I were in prison. I would make sure that my release plan at least addresses this, okay? And I gave more information on this release plan, I think, right? Well, it'll be in the show notes below. Let me go back here. I'm getting too many tabs open. Okay, so look at these things. As I do on all of these things, I put these additional tools down here. This is the National Institute of Corrections. That is a Department of Justice agency that is run by the Bureau of Prisons. It's where they do all of their training. So if I click this link right here, okay, and I understood what are they doing, I know how my case manager defines excellence, okay? They are going to be looking at all these kinds of information. The more you know about it, the better off you're going to be in creating something that makes the unit team look good. And your whole job here in self-advocacy is to understand, I want to make them look good because I want to be at the top of the list. I want to be different from every other person in prison. When they recommend me for early release, I'm top of the food chain. I'm number one person. And so that's what these resources help us do. They help us create a release plan that's comprehensive. Not just, I've got a job waiting for me. Not just, my wife is going to support me. No, you also want to have an affidavit from whoever your support group is. You want to have clarity on your release plan. And I'll show you, again, I'll be sending you, all of you, what I think is a good one. And you can decide how comprehensive do you want to make yours. When it comes, I'm going to go to number 7. I'm working on Amazon and I work at a golf course. Should I tell them that I am going to prison? And should I ask them if they would rehire me? I think that's a personal question, Joe. And I don't want you to do anything that's going to make it difficult for you to stay on that job, because that job is great. And the reason it's great is because it's a humble job. And that's what they like to see. They like to see that you've been beaten. You used to be a successful whatever, and now you are working at Amazon or on a golf course on some type of entry-level job. All of that shows humility. All of that shows this is a person that's growing. He has hit bottom and he's moving forward. So if you want to tell them, great. But you've got to use your own judgment. I've known people that have revealed they've got a criminal record and then they got fired. So Amazon is a huge company and they've got a lot of restrictions on, a lot of companies have restrictions on working with felons. So you've got to make your own decision there. But I just think you having the job is great, and that will look great on your release plan. Let's talk about CARES Act, because a lot of people confuse this concept of CARES Act with First Step Act. Under this memorandum right here, and there's a link, I don't have to open it, but under the memorandum, it provides that the Attorney General advised the Bureau of Prisons to let people out. And the guidelines are that if somebody has more than an 18-month sentence, they're considered at 50% of serving their sentence, transition them to home confinement, provided the other factors are met, and our team will help you with those other factors. Release plan is an essential factor, okay? Why we have a whole webinar on it. The second is, if your sentence is 18 months or less, and you served at 25%, you're eligible for transition to home confinement. Again, assuming these other factors. So Chuck, based on what you wrote, 10-month sentence, you're eligible at 2.5 months. Okay. So you will have served 25% of your sentence at 2.5 months, and you're less than 18 months. So we want to start getting you ready at 2.5 months. I'm going to ask you, have you worked with our team on preparing your pre-release stuff so that you're kind of ready? Because you should do that before you surrender if your sentence is so short. Have you done that already? Has somebody worked with you from our team on getting you teed up for CARES Act? If you haven't, let's make sure that happens. Have you done it already, Chuck?
I sent it to you.
Oh, my wife just told me she sent it to you yesterday. So the questionnaire. Did you get a questionnaire, Chuck? Yes? Show me. I can't hear you, so just show me on your screen. I can see your face. Yeah. Okay, great. Work through that. And then so all that's done before you get there, because you don't have a lot of time, right? You got 2.5 months. We want to make sure, we don't want you to take it with you, but we want to have it complete or drafted out before you get there. And then we'll send it to you once you're there. And my wife will help you. She's great at CDC stuff because she's got a master's in nursing. So that's CARES, fundamentally different from First Step Act. First Step Act applies. It could even advance that 2.5 months. If you're there for a month and you did 15 days, you got that credit. You're going to be eligible in 2 months. Okay. I don't think you can do it in 1 month because that's not enough time. You got to earn the credits first. But after a month, your release date should be advanced. if it shows up, whether it shows up on your computation, it's too short. Just count on 2.5 months. Bureau of Prisons is a slow bureaucracy. I would count on 2.5 months. Earned time credits. For those of you who have longer than 10 months, let's talk about earned time credits, okay? Every month, you can earn up to 15 days off of your sentence, assuming you are low or minimum pattern score. That's a big deal, right? Because if you're in prison for 24 months, you could earn an entire 12 months off your sentence. That's a full year. Now you got to do 2 years before it happens, but that's a big deal. So you really want to apply for all of the credits. You also want to know that there's no limit to the earned time credits you can get. After you get the 12 months, the rest of that is going to apply to your qualifying you for early termination or early advancement to halfway house or early termination of supervised release. So you should never stop participating in these earned time credits. That's very important because it's going to influence on when you get out. If you don't have a minimum pattern score, your participating in the programs will move you to a lower pattern score. So this is crucial. I don't know if you have questions on it, but it relates to the CARES Act, but it's different from the CARES Act because this applies to you regardless if you get CARES Act or not, okay? CARES Act is very specific. It's only related to the pandemic, and they've got to recommend you. We're going to do our best to make you a good candidate for recommendation. And you are going to do your best by making sure that you have a good release plan, you participate in the FRP program, and you don't get disciplinary infractions. Now, I've got a question here. Oh, I've already answered that question. That was Joe's question. So I have now come to the end of our webinar because I've already shown you this National Institute of Corrections things. And I've already extended this by longer than an hour. I apologize for that, but I just wanted to thank you and let you know if anybody has any questions specifically, I'm very happy to respond to them and to thank you guys for being a part of our community. But are there any questions before I wish everybody a great weekend? So everybody's cool. Okay. Oh, Josie, thank you kindly in advance. All right.
Michael, I just want to say goodbye.
Karen, I want to wish you a successful journey in there. When do you surrender? How much are you're on your way there?
I'm about 10 minutes away.
Okay. Well, look,
Connect with us.
make sure that you connect with us as soon as you get access to core links. And everybody on the webinar is going to be in your position at some point, but we are here to help you, and we'll continue sending you information while you're there through both core links, but also through the regular mail. Okay?
See you on the flip side.
We'll see you on the flip side.
Good luck.
There is a flip side. Okay, God bless everybody. Bye-bye, and have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks, Anthony.
I got a question, Michael.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
How can I help?
So back to my email earlier in the week. As a foreigner, I don't get any of the time off, RDAP, CARES Act.
What is your sentence? Are you sentenced already?
No, I still have to go down and surrender, but I'm going to cooperate.
Okay.
And my lawyer's, he's trying to get me under the 5-year mark. I can get a lot of points by cooperating against the CEO.
Yeah.
And just, so really I'm trying to figure out, aside from character witnesses, my narrative in the PSR.
Let me stop recording this first.
Okay.
Because this should be private, and I'll
Okay.
stop recording.